maybe at least two kinds of negation. Maybe we find three. So there is often a simplex negation which is somewhat restricted. So in Hindi this is just na or na. And then there is a complex negation which is nahi. Nobody, synchronically, we don't know what to do with nahi. Like it's not clear to me that we want a clearly decompositional analysis of nahi at this point, but there are two folk theories. I am saying folk theories because I don't have any evidence in support of them one way or the other. One is a theory that we played with, that maybe nahi in at least one of its lives is an auxiliary, and in fact it is a present auxiliary. So it's negation plus present auxiliary. So that's one life, and that would explain why it licenses deletion of why it allow in certain circumstances when nahi is present, the other auxiliary can go missing. Right. But it is curious that even when it allows the other auxiliary to go missing, nahi does not necessarily sit in the position where the other auxiliary would sit. Okay, so let's take the example Ram phal khata hai. A very natural, when you negate it, you would get Ram phal nahi khata. Okay, so note that nahi makes hai optional, but it does not sit where hai sits. You could sort of also say Ram phal khata nahi, but that doesn't sound as natural. The natural thing that makes the hai optional is when nahi is sitting in its normal position. So even if it is, so I'm not sure that even when we say that nahi has one life as an all present tense auxiliary in Hindi, then I think what we might want to say is that it has enough to license the deletion of that, or it has enough to satisfy whatever that satisfies, but at least syntactically it's not sitting in that slot. So it's still not quite the same. But anyways, that's one idea. And we will see that idea, for Hindi it's questionable, but for a language like Marathi, it is a fact. There's no question. Okay, so there's that. And then there is another idea that people have had, is that the difference between na and nahi is that nahi is emphatic somehow. Okay, that it has he in it, na plus he, and that gives you nahi. God knows where the negation comes from, the nasalization comes from, but fine. Okay. The problem again is that maybe this is how nahi arose in the language, if that was in fact the path it took. But in contemporary Hindi, nahi is not emphatic, it is just negation. If you want to negate a sentence, you use nahi. It's not like by using nahi you are like banging your fist. There might be other ways of indicating emphasis, but nahi can be used in a completely normal negation. So at least synchronically, it's not emphatic. So that may be where it comes from. But anyway, so you can sort of see this pattern of simplex complex is there in Hindi, in Punjabi, and then in Gujarati you seem to get both nahi and nathi, and Marathi seems to have the na form, the simplex form, and then it has a complex form which seems to be a verb which also agrees. So I don't know if the Gujarati nathi agrees, whether it's just a fixed form or does it change shape? Nathi? Yeah, no. So the nathi is a fixed, but it looks verbal, while the Marathi is the one where you have this clearly negative. Yeah, I mean, and Marathi is not the only language with negated auxiliaries. Bangla is well known for having negated auxiliaries. Okay. So, yeah. So as I said, the complex in some languages. So in Marathi and with the relevant forms. So actually, I mean, let's see. Maybe we will get to this example. What happens in Marathi when you don't have an auxiliary and you negate? So like let's take a verb like some verbs don't have auxiliaries, I imagine, right? Like the future maybe, right? So what form of negation do you get when you have a future? So Ram Delhi jayega, Ram Delhi nahi jayega. So here you don't have an auxiliary that the neg could attach to in Marathi. So what form would you use here?
We use nahi, but the future form also changes. You have a prospective aspect, which so the verb comes with the prospective aspect and can't.
Ah, I see. So basically, if you want to do sentential negation, an auxiliary pops up even when there was no auxiliary. Okay, this is a super Dravidian pattern. This is how Tamil does it. This is what, no, and I know that this is also, I'm pretty sure this is what Malayalam also does. So that I think that basically there is a negative verb, and then the negative verb comes in and then embeds something else. So this is also very interesting. This is very interesting because I think it tells you how the future is built up, right? That the fact that you can basically get the same form, the negative form and the positive form obviously have to be related because they have to have more or less the same semantic content except for polarity. But the fact that a simplex form ends up being exploded is, I think, very interesting. So it's worth looking at various kinds of forms which are obligatorily where there is no auxiliary, and looking at what happens when you put in a negation. So another environment which would be interesting would be the one which we were looking at, the subjunctive, the word subjunctive, right? There again, there's no auxiliary. And then when you negate that, what happens? And this may also be an interesting place because you might find that there is variation across varieties. There might be interesting variation because sometimes the negative form that you will get will not necessarily be completely identical, okay, to the positive form, but that's the best that the language can do, and then that will be used. So I'll give you one, because languages often have constructions which cannot be straightforwardly negated. Hindi, and I bet this might be the same for Marathi and Gujarati, is that, so in Hindi the compound verbs cannot be negated. So this is a really curious fact. So you can say Ram ne phal kha liya. All else being the same, you cannot say Ram ne phal nahi kha liya. It just means like, what are you saying? Ram ne phal nahi. It's not syntactically bad, by the way. Syntactically, there is nothing wrong because you can create strings. Kahi Ram ne phal to nahi kha liya. That's perfectly okay, right? With this, so these compound verbs, there's a technical term for these. I mean, these are constructions that cannot be in the semantic scope of negation. There is nothing syntactically, so there is no problem with negating them syntactically. So syntactically, you can put in a negation as long as that negation somehow gets cancelled out. So another example, this is from Peter Hook. There is the jab tak construction, which is very interesting because you get negations in the jab tak construction which are very surprising. So you can say, jab tak train nahi aa jati, I will sit here. Okay. And now this is very interesting because you are negating aa jati, right? Which is not something that negates. But the idea here is that the jab tak train nahi aa jati, this negation somehow is, sometimes people call it an expletive negation because it's a little bit hard to pin down exactly what this negation is doing. In fact, if you do the test and so on, what you can find is that this negation is not actually licensing NPIs and things like that. This negation is funny. So going back to the Hindi case, Ram ne phal nahi kha liya. If you want to negate it, the best you can do is Ram ne phal nahi khaya. So when you negate compound verbs, you end up retreating to the simplex verb. And so now, what is the negation of Ram ne phal nahi kha liya? One thought is maybe it doesn't have a negation, right? The other thought is Ram ne phal nahi khaya is the negation. My instinct is that it doesn't have it just doesn't have a negation, and this is the best we can do. So in Marathi, when you get this prospective aspect with when you're negating the future, can that, now suppose you remove the negation, does the structure collapse? It's still possible. Okay, so maybe what that is telling us that in Marathi those structures simply cannot be negated, and this prospective aspect structure is the best you can do.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
Actually, I wanted to ask you, ma'am, can you explain what you want to say? Yeah, because I couldn't get that prospect.
Future negation. So Ram उद्या येईल आहे. How will I negate Ram? कल नहीं आएगा. I have to say Ram उद्या येणार नाही.
हाँ.
So the noun form is different from the future paradigm that we get.
Right.
And then the nahi, when we remove it, then
So Ram उद्या येणार. That is possible in positive sense.
येणार is
So it's not possible. Do you not like the sentence?
येईल is natural, no? येणार is not natural.
They are semantically different slightly, but in my variety at least that's possible to say Ram उद्या.
येणार आहे is
राम उद्या येणार आहे.
येणार आहे. येणार आहे. I mean,
I
येणार
can say it without auxiliary verbs.
So that this is I think this is a very intriguing pattern. So everyone, all the Marathi speakers should sort of just poke at all the places where you don't have auxiliaries and see what happens, right? Because when you have an auxiliary, you know what's going to happen. So that's going to be easy. You will take the auxiliary and you'll just replace it by the negative auxiliary. What happens? So it might be that a range of environments become very tricky in negation, because there's just so the idea there is that since there is only one locus of negation, sentential negation, and if that locus is already occupied, then you're stuck. If it's occupied by an auxiliary, then it's fine, because then you can replace the auxiliary with a negative auxiliary. With other things, it's going to be tricky, right? So
This thing about auxiliaries also, I found that some people get affected by the written forms while speaking.
yeah,
If you ask them for data, they will give the auxiliary.
I see.
If you just observe the natural speech, often they drop.
Right. No, so then that is also interesting, because we've like I was looking at this data that Aditya had, and in that there was this it's important that the auxiliary contracts, and it is really a good question whether there really is an auxiliary in colloquial spoken Marathi. Maybe the auxiliary is there only in the orthography or in the learned form, right? That if you did not have access, if you took speakers who had not been exposed to written Marathi, you would never ever hypothesize an auxiliary. You would just say this is another piece of inflection, this is another probe sitting on the clausal spine, and that's it.
And often students, when they collect data,
Mhm.
because they have this formal thing in their mind, they collect data for the auxiliary,
Yeah,
which is not
present. It might not be present at all.
and not necessarily present.
Right, and then, but what might be interesting is, okay, here's a thought. So let's say we are saying that in certain varieties of Marathi, in fact, maybe the most popular varieties, the common varieties of Marathi, there is no auxiliary. Okay, that guy comes and sits on the head. Maybe what we might see in Marathi is, in effect, do support. Okay, so what's do support? Do support is the situation, you take something like John ate the apple. Now, if you want to put the idea behind John ate the apple is that really in English what you have is, so T past tense with P, I'm just going to eat the apple, John. Okay, this is the structure of John ate the apple. Once you are done with the syntax, then an operation happens which lowers this guy to this. And then it becomes John ate the apple, from John passed eat the apple. Okay, so in one way or the other, I think the literature agrees that something like this happens. Okay, now suppose you put in a neg here. This is where the knot goes. Then this cannot happen anymore, because this lowering happens under adjacency. Okay, structural adjacency, and so this cannot lower anymore. Now English has a way of saving the structure Okay. Now, based on what you said, here is an idea, which is let's say that in modern Marathi, spoken Marathi, something similar is happening. So, you have the verb, so when you don't have the negation, you have some kind of inflectional ending, okay? So, yeah, something. And what would normally happen is that these two things would combine. But when you throw in the neg here, this combination gets blocked. And now you have to put in a B up here, and then these things get realized together. Okay. So one way of thinking about what we are seeing in Marathi is B support. That unlike English, which has do support, Marathi might have B support, that which we might not realize that it has, right? The way I was talking about it initially was different. I was like, oh, you actually have an auxiliary, replace the auxiliary with a negative auxiliary. But that was a lie, because there was no auxiliary. There was just inflection which was combining with the verb. It's putting in the negation that forces the auxiliary to be independent. So this would be worth playing with. Okay. Yes. This is also like Dravidian? No, this is not. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in Tamil, when negation comes, all the agreement ends, everything goes.
Ah, yes, yes.
His claim was that in Dravidian, negation, agreement, and model, everything targets one position.
Yes, yes, yes. So you're right, I had forgotten that. So basically, the difference is that in the Dravidian case, the negation is really targeting a particular slot and it is blocking other things. In this system, it's not actually blocking anything. What it is blocking something, it's blocking these two guys from getting together. Right. So this system is actually a little bit more like do support. Right. But this is why actually the discussion that happened between Renuka and Mukta is interesting, because that, I think the question is what happens when the two things don't get together. We've seen what happens when you put a negation in between, then the two things cannot combine. So can you also not combine when there is no negation? Right? And when there is no negation, what forces? So in English, it's actually, let's look at one case. In English, when you say John did not eat the apple or John didn't eat the apple, you get do support, right? Or what happens when you don't have a not? Can you get do support or not? So yeah, so for emphasis, yes. So you can say John did eat the apple. Yeah, sorry, so I switched. Yes, John did eat the apple, but you cannot say John did eat the apple. Like if you put in the do, you have to stress it. So a very commonly held hypothesis is that there is just like there is a negation, there is a silent like polarity phrased. So just like there is a no, there is a yes, and that yes intervenes, and that's why you can get do. Okay, but you can't get. The point is you cannot just freely insert do. Otherwise, you could imagine, right? There are two structures. There's one structure where we directly insert something in do, in T. Do can be freely inserted in T. That would allow you to say, John, did you eat the apple? Which you cannot. Okay. So this is the question for Marathi, which is, can you insert an overt auxiliary? And this will be slightly difficult to test because you will have to strip away your written Marathi intuition. So you will, can you in normal colloquial speech use the full auxiliary even when there is no negation? Okay. And this might be super hard to test because our intuitions are so so heavily influenced by what we read, right? So one might say, oh, of course, yeah, I can just read the text slowly and then I will pronounce the auxiliary. But can you really do that without any other consequences? With negation, that's the only choice. So that will help us decide between do support. The interesting thing about do support is that do support is a last resort operation. So you can only do support when everything in the house would burn down if you did not do support, right? So the question is, can we do auxiliary support, this be support in Marathi, can we only do it when we need to do it in order to host negation, or can we do it freely? And now you have to think about the written versus spoken. Yeah.
In this case, the here or the affixal T can also occasionally come on the negation.
Yeah, no, but I think, I mean, what do you mean that it can, I thought it had to come on the negation. When you put nahi, I thought the nahi, that the affixal stuff had to go on the negation, right? That the negation plus the B plus the...
So you may or may not have the T.
Hmm.
So, if I say
Actually, maybe it might be useful to look at, I have some Marathi examples, so I will skip 1.2 and come back to that. So this is an example from Pandhari Pandey. They did not go to the market yesterday. And what she notes is this, that in this case, they has the inflection of they, the plural inflection comes, so you get nahit, right?
right, so in this case, nahi, the agreement, so there's nahi form and the agreement
Yeah.
nahi, which has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But if I consider this to be the positive affirmative sentence with the auxiliary, the present tense auxiliary,
Mm-hmm.
I can also say nahi ye. So you have nahi plus the affixal auxiliary plus the affixal.
Yes, nahi yet, yes. Oh, nahi yet, I see. So you can also say nahi yet. Ah, okay. So then there are really two slightly different structures. One structure where the negation, the nahi negation, is appearing. Mm-hmm. So nahi yet would be a little bit like the Hindi kind of structure, right? Where and the other case where the negation is really on T, it is in the auxiliary.
So if the sentence, the affirmative, the minus negation sentence is basically without the auxiliary,
Mm-hmm.
in this case, you will simply have the core A. But if this is perfect, perfective with the tense,
Yeah,
then nahi yet will occur.
I see. Okay. And nahi yet will occur, and can nahit also occur, or nahi yet has to occur? Has to occur.
Nahi yet or the written orthographic form as nahi ahit.
Nahi ahit. Yeah, I see. Okay, so I think there is, as you can see, there are interesting things to be done here. There are lots of, and whatever you find here, it will engage with a very interesting literature on do support. You should definitely, when you're looking at these facts, read up on do support and think about how the realization of negation connects with that. Okay, so let's go back to section 1.2. So there is the na nahi. Many Indo-Aryan languages also have a prohibitive negation, which is starts with ma in many languages. Use roko mat, use mat roko. So both of these orders seem to be acceptable. There's a form in Gujarati, this ma, and this prefix of this negation mi. I did not actually tell you about the Kashmiri. Kashmiri has a suffixal negation, so it has a, unlike all these other languages where this na, the negation is separate, technically separate from the verb, though very close to it. The Kashmiri negation is a critic on the verb, and it gets sandwiched between the agreement morphemes and so on. So it's out there.
I don't think maybe some variation in this.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe speaking ma, but I've never heard people say ma for like a mat form.
Okay, so what is used now?
It's nahi.
Okay, so this is okay. I bet this probably existed in 1965 or 1960 or whenever Cardona did his work. So in 50 years, maybe the ma has disappeared. That is very interesting. It's interesting. I should look up, say, what more recent grammars say, like doctor. What does he say? With ma?
Not ma, it is jaunake.
Jaunake. Right. So nake, and it's a separate. It's a distinct form? Is it a form that's distinct from the form that you get in other environments?
Because we have a separate marker for
Regular negation.
yes, and nake is only in
In imperatives. Okay. So actually, this substitution is. I find that in polite imperatives, I can. It's okay for me to not use mat. So I can say wahan mat jaiye, but or I can also say wahan na jaiye. Wahan na jaiye sounds a bit informal, but I can use it. Wahan nahi jaiyega is okay. Wahan nahi jaiye feels a little bit on the odd side of things. So that's the prohibitive. I don't have that much more to say about it, except that the prohibitive is often different. And this is interesting that it is negation. It's very clearly negation, but it's a different. These languages to express negation in imperatives, they use an entirely different form. This is, in some sense, not crazy because what we know is that negation in imperatives is often weird. In many languages, what you find is that negation in imperatives does something different to the syntax. So in many Romance languages, what you will find is that when you are, let's say, the imperative will be drawn from the subjunctive morphology. When you try to negate the subjunctive morphology in an imperative, suddenly the imperative morphology, the subjunctive morphology will disappear altogether, and you will find an infinitive. So in Hebrew and I think many Romance languages, if you try to say don't do that, you don't say that, but you say not to do that. Out of the blue, an infinitive pops up. Okay, so this could be a reflex of that the language somehow feels that the regular negation is not going to cut it, and then it brings up a special negation. Okay, now we come to the next thing, which is often, which is something there is a lot of confusion about, and this is constituent negation. Okay, so constituent negation is a situation where you are specifically, you're not negating the entire sentence, but it's almost as if you are taking a part of the sentence and you are saying not this. So let me see if I can make a good one. So my intuition about constituent negation is that in general, so let me give you some intuitions from English. So in English, there is sentential negation, and that is the negation that appears on T. That we all agree that negation exists and triggers do support and all of that. Then we can also separate out two other kinds of negation. So let me write down a sentence and then we can stare at it. Versus compare this with so when you say you